Hey, everybody. Michelle is up. Um, yeah, the lighting, whatever. We'll be all right. You guys can hear me. So that's all that matters, really. So, my dad used to tell me about how my grandmother used to have these techniques as to how she would be resourceful for providing food and whatnot, to the family. And, usually uh, it never really made sense how things were done. But again, people that have taken care of land for generations and centuries and centuries and centuries, that stuff stores it stays stored inside their subconscious. And so, whenever you ask for some help, you get the answers and the impulses, okay, from your former personalities that taught you these things. And I know that sounds like a crazy plot, and that's what I want you to consider it as. My dad used to tell me how my mom would make sausages in the ground. Did anybody know about that kind of technique? I won't share because I know it'll be stolen. So, but those of you who know that, yeah, the technique that she used. So so you become resourceful when you need to. You become resilient when you need to. Okay, so I know people always pay attention to me since I moved over here. I know that for because I could tell by how the mini blinds moving, and it was at first it was annoying. I was like, God, do they not have anything to do? But I just know how people operate. I just know how people operate, and I know that we're always watched. Okay, but the cameras are being turned on, the watchers, and that'll make sense. I'll talk about that later. But anyway, when I moved, let me turn that down so they don't think I'm. Okay, so when I moved in the house, this house was in trouble. I mean, it was real. So when I got the house, I called it my retirement house. That's what I called it. But essentially, what turned out to be is my recovery house. This house, I needed this house to recover, okay, and it was the perfect, the perfect treatment. If it was perfect treatment. And as a matter of fact, I remember reading that story about him. I think he was an elderly man, okay, and he was told that he had cancer, right? And so what he decided to do is, instead of being treated, he just left and went back to his country country. I'm not sure which, maybe Greece, or I don't know what country it was. And he decided to say, well, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die. So he'll say, I'd rather die in my own country. So that's what he did. And supposedly, he outlived his doctor. In other words, the cancer didn't affect him in any way. He lived until he was almost, he was at a late stage of aging, and he was still around doing his thing in his own country. His doctor, who told him that he only had so many months to live, was dead while he was still alive. It is the power of the thoughts, people. That's the point. So anyway, I know people watching me over here. So the yard was in trouble, severe trouble. All the trees were dead. The trees were dead. So I had to pull them out. I didn't like to do that, but I had to. You could tell they just was. There was a lot of neglect, with not to mention inside, but definitely outside. Okay, people used to always watch me and watch what I was doing, and I know that because I had to implement certain things to try to bring this soil back to as natural as possible, because that's where it starts, right? In the soil, in the thoughts. So let me just say this real quick. I recently replaced my septic tank, because we have septic tanks out here. Whereas we are somewhat off grid with our sewer and such, it just goes into, it goes into drains, and then eventually into a septic tank. In other words, my waste goes in there, and then blah blah blah, and it decomposes or composes at a certain rate, and then eventually. So that's actually healthy for the lawn to have septic tanks, but just hold that. Okay, but anyway, so I did everything I could to counter what was going on with the yard, and bring in these so-called healthy insects and healthy this and healthy that, so they can counter the ones that were caught reaping havoc and just eating up everything and tearing up the place. You know what I mean? Like praying mantis, which are perfect, and it'll make sense at some other time. So my point is, when I replaced my septic tank, I layered the ground in my front yard with cardboard, plastic, burlap, everything imaginable to kind of suppress anything that would want to come through, right? Or force through. Okay, I told you about in October, I think it was, after the storm Nicole, how intentional stagnated wastewater, whatever type of water, was forced through our water lines, or our water lines, because they were attempting to overload our septics with all that water, because so they can make room for other people to get the water out of their yard, which would not recede. It was stagnated, and they knew they had to move it. They had to do something with it. They couldn't put it back into, it could not be known that they were putting back into the river, because they're not supposed to have done that. So what do they do instead? They use the water line, and they use other people's septic to do it that way, to bring it back down into I guess they call it the reservoir or the water tank or whatever that is. So anyway, after I had my septic tank replaced, I layered the ground with cardboard, this and that would block anything, even a rat. Okay, and that makes sense to certain individuals, and that's why I wanted to bring that story in. So that's what I do. I look for natural repellents, okay, to help me bring my yard back into balance with the right kind of insects. Instead of I don't use pesticides at all. There were some type of natural repellents, which I didn't see any. A lot of it, a lot of people get into that field of saying that they are providing organic and providing what's that other term? I can't remember the other term. Which turns out to be a lot of bullshit, because I tested everything. I use whatever. I'm not gonna say, but I use I use those that their advices, that people give all over the place, all over the universe, all over the internet. It's so-called repellents, and a lot of people are just lying, and they don't know what the hell they're talking about. But these were what people say are natural repellents. So that's what I did. I replaced my septic tank, and I know people think I'm crazy. That's why but I noticed they're doing some of the similar things that I'm doing. Okay, they're putting they're enhancing their property, put it that way. All right, and it looks almost like mine. But before I came in here, I told you it was like a ghost town. It was dead. The houses were in poor condition, and so that's why I figure this was the perfect environment so that I can get my yard in shape, enough time to get my yard in shape because their yards were not in shape. So that would have been a perfect. Okay, so you have to be creative, and you have to be. You can't be retaliatory, and you got to give people what they want, right? You got to give the people what they want. So again, I put down cardboard. People thought, what the, that bitch crazy, because they watching me. Because I saw people coming by and looking like, why has she got cardboard down? And then I put burlap, and I put a whole layer of shit down. Okay, so that way it can block anything, like I said, even a rat. So that'll make sense at another time, but I just want to share. Again, you can't be concerned about people calling you crazy. And because the people are always watching what you're doing. They're always watching me in my yard. Every time I come out of my goddamn yard, these people were watching me. And I got annoyed at especially with, I just got annoyed at one point. But then I said, you know what? You just got to, I just neutralized all of that and just went on my way. And so I know what I'm doing. And I just want to send peace and love to everybody all over the universe. And I'll be back. Trust me.